Hello, I'm Adam,
And I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we're talking about Event Horizon.
Paul W.S. Anderson's magnum opus.
I think it might be. 1997. I guess this is the era he was really getting a lot of work. Maybe this into like the early 2000s. And I think never mind. I was gonna say out of all the films he's directed, this might be my favorite, but he directed the Mortal Kombat movie, I think, and therefore that is my favorite.
That is definitely my
Yeah, it's
favorite
easily
as
my
well.
favorite.
I mean, I'll call him a prolific director because he has directed many, many huge blockbusters. He's behind Mortal Kombat from 95. He's behind this movie. He, of course, did Alien versus Predator later on. He did the Resident Evil franchise. He did Death Race. So he's had some not necessarily successful movies. I also think he did the recent Monster Hunter movie. Um, so he's done a lot of video game movies, and they haven't been successful critically, but they've all been very expensive projects. So that's the kind of guy we're talking about here.
Yeah, he at this point I've recognized the style of his film. That style being like dumb action, and the plot makes no sense. But
Yep.
I love it. I think I might like to meet him. I think we could be friends. Just like he's clearly just like a guy. He plays a lot of video games, we know. He might not be, the deepest individual, but I'm sure he's fun.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of like anything this guy's done.
No, I know. I
Um,
didn't. I won't say that. I wouldn't go that far.
Maybe Resident Evil is my favorite of his movies.
Really?
Well, that first one was far better than I had
You just said
anticipated.
Mortal Kombat.
I know. I'm back and
Oh,
forth.
it's easily Mortal Kombat for me. I love the Mortal Kombat movie.
We've already talked about too many Paul W.S. Anderson movies
I know he's
on this
back.
podcast.
He's back.
A friend of the show, Paul W.S.
Friend of the
Anderson,
show.
taking up yet another of our slots.
Yeah. Now he mostly does like video game movies, dumb action movies, like I said. This movie is, I think, his biggest venture into the horror genre, horror sci-fi.
Oh
This
yeah.
is Resident Evil. It's zombies and monsters, but I don't know if I'd call it horror. It's definitely action, but it's just one of these video game movies. But this, not based on a video game, and there's some real horror elements. So I think it, in a way, as like one note as this director is, this is his biggest like venture into something different.
Yeah.
It's not saying much.
It's definitely different than everything else in his catalog. Now, I guess we could debate whether that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, I like this movie. It's not good, but it's fun. I've seen it twice now. It's a good time, I think. It's
Well, yeah, I definitely had fun watching it.
I think I saw a movie called like Ghost Ship or something that had literally this exact same plot, but it was on a cruise ship instead of a spaceship.
And it wasn't hell.
Well, I mean, it kind of was. Like, it was really haunted, and they were like, the ship doesn't want you to leave, and that's a big theme here.
This movie made me just want to play Doom instead of watching it.
Okay, I mean, I think I'd rather play Doom than most things.
Yeah, but so the very, very basic premise of this movie, if you're not familiar, is we have a starship. It is on a rescue mission, very much just like Alien. The beginning is almost identical to Ridley Scott's first Alien film, and they're responding to some sort of signal, and essentially, the ship is like a portal to hell. I don't really know how to describe it outside of that. Sci-fi meets Christian horror.
It's kind of like a big reveal halfway through the movie, but it's kind of, it's also dumb and not. So it kind of is like hard to talk about this movie without getting the hell thing out in the open like immediately. Basically, this doctor built a ship, and the ship can go into a black, like it generates a black hole. And I think the idea is it can like open a wormhole so that way it can like teleport. It goes into another dimension, comes out in another place. And it disappeared when its maiden voyage tried to do that, and now it's reappeared. And we find out where it went all this time was literally to hell. It teleported to hell and is now back floating through space. Now, why black holes lead to hell, or why this wormhole opening was a portal directly to hell, we don't ever get an explanation. Why would the Christian hell be something that you find in space, and how would we even know about hell if it was what's in a black hole? Because nobody's ever been in a black hole. All these questions
exactly.
and more. Yeah, all these questions and more will not be answered in this film.
See, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That did not bother me whatsoever.
Yeah,
I think this is a very cool premise. I accept that going into a black hole will send your ship into hell. I accept it. I like it. It is horrifying.
Yeah.
Like that is effective. That's a scary thought, in my opinion.
Yeah, the signal they get at the beginning of the movie, immediately, like, it's like a bunch of screaming and you can hear someone like whispering something, and for, absolutely convenient plot's sake, it's exactly like in Alien Covenant when someone's singing Country Road and then like Dallas just so happens to know. He was like, I'd recognize Don Denver anywhere. Exactly like that. In this movie, there's a guy speaking Latin, and conveniently someone on board of the other ship that's investigating the disappearance of the Event Horizon just like knows Latin and is like, oh, they're saying this. And then later on, we find out the translation is save yourself from hell. He thinks initially it's save us, and then he finds out it's save yourself from hell. Now, why this other ship, why these crew members on the Event Horizon are speaking Latin, I don't know. I have no idea. How do they know Latin? Because hell, that's,
That actor that plays that character, DJ, who I believe is the doctor on the ship, do you know where he's from?
The like medical doctor. I've seen him in a few other things. What are
he's Lucius Malfoy in Harry Potter. Which I think is really funny.
I think he's done more than just that, but yeah.
I mean, sure, but come on. Once you're in those movies, that's all you are.
That I like that. Yeah, that's a good point.
I do know he's also Zhao in Avatar.
Oh, he's the main like evil British dude in The Patriot.
That too.
He's Zhao in Avatar. I
He's
didn't know that.
Zhao in Avatar. That's cooler than anything else he's done.
Whatever. Sorry. Absolutely.
No, it's okay.
So the critical reception of this movie is not great. 29% Rotten Tomatoes, 35% Metacritic, 6.7 out of 10 on IMDb. I'm seeing on Google. I thought that was... How do you feel about that rating?
Which one? The Rotten Tomatoes one, or...
I think the disparity between 6.7 on IMDb and 29% on Rotten Tomatoes is a lot. I mean... quality-wise, maybe that's appropriate. It's not like a good movie, but it's so fun.
I find that the best middle point for like a good, bad movie on Rotten Tomatoes is anything above 20% and under 40%.
I completely agree, because there's so many of these 60% movies that they're nothing.
Exactly. And I think that this movie is adequately rated on Rotten Tomatoes because this is a 29. I had the fun that a 29 brings me watching this movie. I do like this movie. Like all jokes aside, I think the premise is funny and interesting and actually a little scary. Some of the body horror is actually pretty good. And it's got the Paul W.S. Anderson flair that we've come to grow and love. The constant use of like the electronic bumpa music. I don't know what to call it. um, the really weird, intense zooms.
And then
He,
just the dumb everything.
yeah, the dumb everything else. I like it. I don't know. It makes me laugh. I don't think that it should be critically well received. I think that they're bad movies. I think most of the things he's made are not good. But I still enjoy them.
Yeah. But you did say, and I looked it up, and it seems to be true, that this movie lost money.
Oh yeah. So it had a budget of 60 million around there, and it only made a little bit over 40 altogether in the box office. So that's a pretty huge loss.
That's sad to me. And I can't fathom why. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's got
Is that a joke?
Lawrence Fishburne is like the main character, and Sam Neill's in it. Sam Neill, who's in Jurassic Park and like the Omen franchise. So it's got some known actors. The poster I think looks really cool. You know, cool spaceship flying out of ominous, like blazing red portal looking thing. I don't know. I mean, I think this proves that the majority of his films get attention purely because they have the name of an already established franchise slapped on the cover, like Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, you know.
Yeah. This is like I guess it is interesting, but you have to also keep in mind that Sam Neill wasn't nearly as huge as he was in the early 90s when this movie came out, right? This was already towards the late 90s. So he had already come off of the hype from Jurassic Park 1. And that was coming down. And Lawrence Fishburne wasn't the Lawrence Fishburne that we know today quite yet. He was getting there. Like, this is right before his big boom. This is right before Matrix. And shortly after what I think was a pretty successful Othello adaptation that he was in, that he did pretty good in. He got some critical acclaim for that.
But isn't that amazing? He went from Othello to Event Horizon.
But still, right? He's not. Now is he Larry Fishburne still at this point, or is
No,
he
I think
is he
he's
finally
Lawrence
Lawrence?
Fishburne. He's Lawrence, I think. It says in the credits at the beginning, Lawrence Fishburne. When did The Matrix come out?
2001, right, or 2000?
The Matrix came out in 1999. So yeah, this was
Okay.
right before the Matrix boom.
Yeah. So no one here is quite as famous as they should have been to sell this as like their top billed cast, right? And I don't even know if Paul W.S. Anderson, other than Mortal Kombat, had anything big under his belt. I mean, Mortal Kombat was a critical success.
Yeah, but his name wasn't as attached to it as like to the Resident Evil franchise. Like,
right.
When you say this man's name, you think of Resident Evil, and that's what gave him most of the success he's had. So I guess, yeah, by this point, nobody was that well known. Maybe a little known. Probably not that well known, though. Does it deserve to lose money? No. Does it deserve to be, that successful? Also, no. But, it's a little harsh.
We live in a world where Greatest Showman made tons of money.
Yeah. Things are bleak. Lawrence Fishburne really is too. I think in this movie, like, leagues ahead of everybody else, acting like talent wise. He's really pouring his heart into this movie. It's like it's Event Horizon. He deserves better.
Yeah, he does. And don't worry, I mean, he moved on to better things.
He did, yeah.
Shortly after. So this was just a bump in the road. I mean, not even, though. I feel like Lawrence Fishburne's pretty good in this movie.
Yeah, I know. He's like better than he needed to be for this movie.
Yeah, and I liked most of what Sam Neill did, too, in this film.
Yes.
He was fine until the end, and I don't even think the end was his fault. They turned Sam Neill by the end of this movie, and we can get deeper into the plot in a moment, but by the end of this movie, he's like full on Emperor Palpatine, like devil man villain. Like he's got lesions all over him and he's bald and naked and demonic.
Yeah, he's like trying to get everybody else to go to hell.
It's
He's like the acolyte of hell, and it's very out of left field because he's like one of the like main characters up until that point, and he's also confused trying to figure out what's happening on the ship, and then suddenly this 180 turn into like the villain. It's a little like sudden. It's super sudden.
sudden, it's awkward, it's not great. And I can tell it was probably very foreign for him to play something like that. Because I just didn't buy that he was evil incarnate
Well, you
as he was
say
supposed to
that
be.
he's plays Damien in the third movie in the Omen franchise, so he's literally been son of the devil.
Really?
Yeah.
Does that come after? Was that released after this movie?
No,
or?
I think it was before this movie.
Oh wow!
But honestly, that movie's like not that good.
Isn't he like president?
Yeah, he runs for president.
Isn't that just? Sam Neill's got some stinkers, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's
That
got some
movie's-
stinkers in his belt under his belt.
Yeah. That movie is I want that franchise to be good, but really like the first Omen movie is like such a masterpiece, and then really downhill from there. But you know, whatever. Neither here nor there. He and I can chalk up this like awkward final act with him into just like this is bizarre writing. But all that being said, at the very beginning of this movie, there is a pretty niche meme. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
It's very much a meme at this point that he is a part of. It's because his acting is not that great. He right at the beginning of this movie starts having nightmares about his dead wife like calling to him, and in all these nightmares she doesn't have eyes, and that's a recurring theme in this movie is these tortured souls not having eyes. And I'm not really sure why. They don't really explain why. They're really obsessed with the eyes, though. And he's having this nightmare about his wife, and she's like naked and being all seductive. He's happy to see her. And then she opens her eyes, and the sockets are empty. And he screams, but his scream is just a, oh! And that clip is a meme.
Is it really?
Yes.
I can see why.
Yeah.
I also don't understand the fascination behind the eyelessness in this movie. There are several people throughout the movie that see people without eyes. He often sees his dead wife without eyes, and then at the end tears out his own. I don't. Is that a thing from something? Like, are we missing? Did I miss that part of the Divine Comedy?
No, it's absolutely Paul W.S. Anderson thinking it looked cool.
It didn't. The CGI is bad. Oh, that's one thing about this movie. Like, the effects are incredibly 1997.
Yeah, I think like we get this like initial scene at the beginning, and you know it's budget 60 million. How much CGI? Yeah, I feel like a sci-fi really clearly requires more money than any kind of other film, and it makes sense. 60 million is pretty good though. But at the beginning, we see the ship, not the Event Horizon. I don't remember what the name of their ship is, but
They're on the Lewis and Clark.
yeah, of course they are.
Yeah, and they are seeking the Event Horizon.
Yeah, well, you see the Lewis and Clark flying towards the Event Horizon, and anytime you see a spaceship flying around, it's like it's all right. It's pretty good. You can't complain about it. Any scene inside the Event Horizon, though, there will be like free floating. There's no gravity, so there's free floating objects, and they look so terrible. Especially if there's liquid. There's a lot of like zero gravity liquid that looks so unbelievably bad. Especially just even in comparison to the rest of the film, every other effect looks way better.
No, yeah, the liquid and the free floating objects are some of the worst like late 90s effects I've seen in a long time. For reference, right? Fifth Element came out this same year, Now, mind you, I don't know what their budget was compared to this movie's budget. Funny enough, Mila Jovovich or Jovovich, whatever her name is Paul W.S. Anderson's wife, and she was in the Fifth Element. Um, but I'd say that in comparison, or Men in Black even, though it didn't have great effects, I think we're better. The effects overall are far better in that movie than in this movie. I could keep going, but they're just not very good. Not entirely up to snuff for a late 90s film. I don't know why they insist on showing all those objects up close as though they do look good, right? Like it felt like they were forcing all that into your face. I didn't need to see a free floating Pepsi can.
Well, in Resident Evil, there's that scene where that guy gets like diced by some lasers, and they don't
Yeah.
show all of it because they know they do not have the capability to make it look good. Yet in this movie, they're like, "Look at this thing! It looks terrible." It's like, why focus on this?
He learned. He learned and grew in those, 5 years.
I guess that's true. I guess that might be true. Most of the practical effects are good, though. There's a scene where, there's this crazy Latin guy on some signal that they're following, and we hear it a few times. Towards the end of the movie, we get to see it, though, which I did not think was going to happen.
Yeah, me neither.
And the effects look so bad. They're all practical, but they look terrible. It's everybody's naked and just like doing crazy weird body horror things. One guy, it looks like he's like eating his own arm, like fisting his mouth.
Yes. Did you know
Yeah.
that in those sequences, those were not Hollywood actors? They were instead all porn actors?
I believe it because they just couldn't get anyone to be naked.
Well, that, I guess, and they thought that it would make it like more disturbing, I guess. Like that they would make everything more real. That's their rationalization, just so you know.
That is some Paul logic if I've ever heard it.
That is some Paul logic. Real Paul moment.
Yeah, the guy speaking Latin also in that scene we find out is holding his eyes because once again they're obsessed with this weird eye thing, and the fake eyes he's holding look exactly like fake. Like you can get some at Spirit Halloween that maybe look better. It looked so terrible.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah. Also, why do we even get to see what that audio was, like the video to it? We didn't need to see that. It didn't even need. They didn't need to show how terrible their effects were, but this is another instance of that.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. The sound alone, I think, would have been far more scary. Just letting us imagine what's happening.
Yeah, I think it was, and then you see it, and it's also like they're just like being weird. Like nothing's happening to them. They're just doing weird things to themselves.
Yeah, they're just like, like shaking on camera.
Yeah, it's mostly that, and they're like, "We're in hell," and it's like, but no,
Like-
you're just naked.
Chewing up and spitting out like ground chicken's feet that
Yeah.
they bought at Food Town.
Yeah, it's just stuff like that.
Not scary. Not great. I think the sound alone would have been scarier. Now, we both like this movie, right?
I'll say I had fun doing it. Definitely.
So I reckon we should talk about the things that we like. Go a little into the plot and talk about the things that we enjoyed.
That's gonna be difficult, honestly. But just overall, I think just its goofiness. Spaceship goes to hell. It's fun and it is action packed. This is also one of these movies, an hour and 36 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a movie that knows it doesn't deserve more, but also is like, here's enough time to have fun with. If this movie was 2 hours long, I would have hated it. But an hour 36 is like perfect runtime. It's paced well enough. There's a lot of kind of like meandering going around back and forth, but the meandering is at least like crazy haunted, chicanery's happening, an evil dead corpse is running around and everybody's hallucinating. It's, so it's fun meandering. It's not like it's not a slog. It doesn't drag at all.
Right. You could definitely see a movie like this also, that is tackling themes such as loss and grief and possession and going into subjects like this, you could see a movie of this nature discussing these things, taking itself too seriously and having a runtime of at least 30 minutes over this, right? But I think it just stays the right amount of time.
I think so. I like the big I'll call it the Hellgate. It's this really, it looks like the Stargate from the show Stargate. It's this big spinning gate. It's got a bunch of hoops that spin on an axis together, and
Yeah.
when they all line up, the portal opens and they go to hell. I don't know how that makes the ship teleport, but it does. Whenever
Yeah.
it like opens as a portal, but it's inside the ship. So I don't know how the ship like goes into it, but whatever. You don't care.
The actual physics of the thing make zero sense.
Oh yeah.
In fact, as you were pointing out earlier, not a lot of it makes sense. But I'm willing to believe that they went to hell.
Yeah, and then they do this whole thing of like Dr. William Weir, who's Samuel's character. He built it. He's like, I built it. I should know. I built it. He says that like a few times in the movie. But like one man built this whole spaceship and this Hellgate, and he does not know how it works. Like throughout the film, they get onto the ship, and immediately he's like, I don't know what's going on. So he's like, and he's completely useless the entire time.
And then he ends up killing them.
Yeah, he's absolutely a hazard. Like they get on the ship, they immediately start seeing weird hallucinations and hell imagery. The Hellgate opens and the youngest member gets sucked into the portal and comes out like catatonic, and then he wakes up and just starts doing creepy stuff like he's possessed or something. And they're like, what happened? Oh my god, the Hellgate opened. Another character sees the Hellgate open, and Dr. William Weir the whole time is like, that didn't happen. They're hallucinating. There's no way that could happen. It's perfectly safe. And it's like, well, something clearly happened because all the crew is dead. The ship is abandoned. What do you think? Like, something had to have happened, sir.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that.
He's so, like, he writes everything off, you know? And he keeps seeing his dead wife, too. It's not like he isn't seeing crazy things.
So is it possible that this was his intention the whole time?
No, I think what happened was he's following his wife. He keeps seeing his wife, and that's wearing on him. He claims this expedition is to recover this amazing piece of technology that is this ship. But I think his real intent is to see his wife. He keeps having these dreams of his wife or these visions of his wife calling to him to come to the ship. And so this led me to believe that, oh, well, she was probably on that maiden voyage and he's trying to figure out what happened to her. And that makes sense. But then at the end of the movie, we see him hallucinate her death. He remembers her death. And she just kills herself in a bathroom. And I was like, well, why is she on the ship then? She was never on the ship. So why is he getting visions of her telling... I guess maybe she went to hell when she killed her. I don't know what the logic is.
Yeah, I think what the movie is implying is that since she took her own life, she went to hell, and then him going to hell with the ship would unite them.
Yeah, but he initially doesn't know it goes to hell. He just has this weird feeling of like he has to go to the ship. And that's
Right.
also why he kind of writes things off and doesn't take them as seriously as he should, even while things are starting to happen. But there's a lot of things in this. And I feel like this is a problem with movies in general, where like a hallucination happens or a trick happens that the Hellgate is pulling. And like it's so clearly like a hallucination, a visual trick, yet they don't believe it. There's this woman who keeps seeing her son with like weird cut up legs. There's like cysts on his legs. And regardless of what's happening, she drops everything to run after him. And it's like, lady, your child who lives on planet Earth is not on this haunted ship. Like, just rationalize it. He's so not on the ship. Don't follow him.
And like she falls for it several times.
Yeah,
much to her
repeatedly.
detriment. And each time it's almost like she learns nothing from the time before.
Even when they find out it's a Hellgate, she still like goes after this child. Like they're not literally being influenced by the forces of hell. And like she knows this. She still just drops everything.
And it ultimately leads to her death.
Yeah, and her dead child leads her to the other side of a pit, and she runs and doesn't realize there's a pit, falls in it, and dies. Once again, also, I don't know why there's a giant pit. It leads to the Stargate, but whatever. I don't know how starships are built.
Yeah, the pit reminded me, because it was so impractical, or seemingly so impractical, it reminded me of that random room with the chains in Alien.
Well, in Alien, the chain room is explained as being like the chains create tension on the walls of the ship that kind of like keeps the internal
Dumb.
pressure. Look, they have an explanation. All right. It
Dumb.
reminded. Okay. All right.
I love Alien, but
looks
it's
so
dumb.
cool when the
It does
xenomorph
look
is
really
coming.
cool.
Come off
Oh, it
it.
looks far cooler than this stupid pit room.
Yeah.
Or I guess the pit, which, just leads to the Hellgate.
Well,
That's true, I guess. They do kind of explain it in Alien.
yeah. The Hellgate, as impressive and cool as a set piece it is, or as a set it is, it also does not make sense. There's a tunnel leading into the Hellgate room. It's a cylinder, and there's a bunch of different rotating parts of the cylinder that are all rotating in different directions. And I feel like it just like is made to look trippy. I can't imagine what purpose it serves.
I liked it, though.
I did like it though. Yeah, it looked great.
It was a pretty good visual, excuse
Yeah,
me.
and in this set, like they returned to this room so many times, and I feel like partially because this is the part of the film where all the money went was to this set. Like if one thing was gonna look good, it was gonna be this set, and so I get it, and it does look cool. They do a good job.
Yeah. There were several set pieces and stuff that I liked. I liked the main kind of meeting area that they had. I liked the command station in the beginning because Lawrence Fishburne's character has this chair that kind of floats around. I wasn't actually sure watching this movie, and I've seen bits of it before. But in the beginning, the way that his chair was moving around the space, for a second, I thought he would be in that chair the whole movie. Like I thought it was like a floating wheelchair of sorts. And then it took me a second to realize, no, he just has a cool chair because it's a sci-fi movie. Um, but I like a lot of the places, the locations on the ship. I think they look cool. The
Yeah,
cryo room, or yeah, it's not quite cryo. They're like sleeping in liquid, and that's how they.
the Luke Skywalker healing tanks.
Yes, that's how they heal and pass time in those healing tanks. Um, I like the way that those looked. I really like the locations on this set.
I do too. One thing I would like to bring up and talk about with you is there's a character named Cooper. Do you remember this character?
Dude, of course.
Here we are, yet another instance of Paul W.S. Anderson writing for a black man and doing what a crazy job. What a terrible wow. Paul.
Yeah, it's pretty egregious. It's bad. I had made the same note while watching the movie.
Awe-striking.
Yeah. Yeah, the writing for Cooper is not good. And in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, he sees this her name is Peters in the movie. I'm actually not familiar with the actor that plays her. But Peters is one of the medical techs on the Lewis and Clark. And I kid you not, like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, he's like, hey, we should have sex. Like, just out of nowhere, as though like people do that in real life.
Yeah, and he's like sassy as hell, has some comment after everything that's being said.
Even in moments of like incredible tension, he's just like making jokes and
cracking one line.
yeah, cracking one-liners. It's not good. It's poorly done.
Oh wow. This man. Paul.
I mean, to be fair, like I don't know. This is not for us to keep in, but like Lawrence Fishburne is black and he's in the movie.
Okay, I thought about that.
Okay, address that.
I
Address that
am.
because I don't have the words for it.
I
So
don't know how the writing and casting went. I would believe that he wrote the script and then cast the characters. So I don't think he had a particular race in mind when he was wanting to cast Captain Miller, but he clearly did when he was writing Cooper.
yeah. Oh boy. I know now. I know that he didn't write this movie, but I'm sure he had a lot of say in it.
Who wrote the script?
This
Who?
guy named Philip Eisner. I do know something that made me laugh is that Philip Eisner said that he took a lot of inspiration for this script off of Warhammer 40K, which he really likes.
No, yeah, I guess he did. And this is the number one thing Philip Eisner is known for writing. So this was his big break, and this is where his career peaked.
Damn. His freaking Warhammer 40K fan fiction.
Yeah.
Now, I found out some really interesting stuff about the like production process of this movie.
I'm sure it was a very interesting production.
Yeah, so the first time that they had presented this cut, people hated it and they said that it was too gory. And people in the test audience supposedly fainted from the gore, which I find hilarious because yeah, I guess it's gory, but it's not nearly as bad as some of the stuff that was produced in the early 2000s or even still produced to this day. Um but yeah, like it was it was considered too gratuitous during the first cuts presentation. So he ended up deleting quite a bit of gore, and the video of all those people like eating human remains or whatever that the crew finds, that was supposedly much longer initially, and he was forced by the studio to cut it down.
That explains, I think, why that scene is shot so weirdly, so abruptly, and so quickly. But for the rest of the movie, there's like not much gore at all, and the gore in that scene, like we said, looks terrible. They're practical effects, but they're so bad. It looks so dumb. And I also think it's very funny that audience thought it was too much. The movie Seven
Yeah, it's a
with
good movie.
yeah, Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. Is it?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, that movie came out in '95. This movie came out in '97. So that existed in the world already.
Mm,
This movie was
yeah,
too much.
that's a good point. Also, the ending that they went with at the end of this movie was a combo of two different alternate endings that they had shot. So I think they had three altogether, but they instead combined two that they shot into the one that we saw. So the ending of this movie has the woman on the crew, and let me
One
find her
of
name.
her name is Lieutenant Stark, I believe. I think Peters is the other woman, but she dies by falling into that pit.
Yeah, Stark is the woman that he's really interested in.
Well, they have this forced romance at the end.
They do. They do. No, the ending is super lousy. So Stark, who is actually the character that Cooper is hitting on earlier, I misspoke earlier and said Peters. Stark wakes up from her cryo chamber thing, the Luke Skywalker healing tank, and as she is saved by this rescue crew, and he's in this like large suit where you can't see his face, and he keeps telling her, "It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You're with me." And then he raises his mask, his helmet, and of course, who is it? It's Sam Neill in like demonic fashion. And he takes her, but then she wakes up, and it's just a nightmare. She is in fact saved by an actual rescue crew. Um, her and Cooper are the only two that make it out alive, and then they have like a faux romantic moment for whatever reason. Um, Now, that ending, of course, is like a Frankenstein ending. They use two different scenes, like I was just saying. I'm really interested in the ending that they didn't go with, because throughout the movie they show, and I forget what character is seeing him. I think it's Lawrence Fishburne's character. He keeps seeing that man burning.
Yeah, so we get some backstory on Captain Miller, Lawrence Fishburne's character, that he used to be in like some military group with a guy who set on fire. They were in zero gravity, and there was zero gravity fire, and he got set on fire, and he couldn't do anything, and he had to abandon him. And so he keeps seeing this ghost of his past literally manifest as a burning corpse, and he's like, "Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you save me?" And that's the context for that.
Now here's the thing, though. At the end, I think they were going to initially have the final battle be Lawrence Fishburne's character fighting that man on fire instead of Sam Neill's character.
But that
Isn't
makes
that weird?
sense. Well, I think yes, but right towards the end of this movie, I'd say like the final 2/3 of this movie, the final third of this movie. It really feels like they're trying to find an antagonist. They're trying to find a human person to be an antagonist. Up until this point, the ship is the antagonist. It's just, generally a haunted ship. It's the forces of hell. That's as specific as it gets. But it's like they want someone to embody that. They want a person to be that. And that's why it feels so rushed when Dr. Weir is suddenly the acolyte of hell. But I could definitely understand if at a certain point in this movie they tried to make it that guy. It feels like they were juggling who they should have as the antagonist. But I think the ship can be the antagonist. I mean, it works up until that point. I don't know why they felt like they needed a person to be like, Hellraiser.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely. They did kind of make him look like Pinhead.
Yeah, they definitely wanted him to be Pinhead. He becomes like Acolyte of Hell. It's super Hellraiser.
Yeah, it is. I thought that actually for a brief moment. That whole Lawrence Fishburne monologue about the fire, how fire is so beautiful in zero gravity because it just looks like liquid, and the way that it engulfed that guy as he watched him. I thought was actually a nice moment in the movie. It was a really grounded moment in what is an absolutely ridiculous film. And I commend Lawrence Fishburne for that. I give him all the credit for making that monologue so good. B, it reminded me of the fake lore behind the Phil Collins song "In the Air Tonight." I don't know why. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, where he's like, he saw a guy drowning.
Yeah, and
but
then
like
didn't save him or whatever.
Yeah, that did not happen.
No, it didn't happen, and it makes that song way cooler than it actually is. I don't know, but that started playing in my head as I was watching that sequence. So I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, that scene, yeah, that's one of these scenes. Like Lawrence Fishburne is acting his heart out, giving this monologue, and it's Event Horizon. Like he's too good for this movie.
Yeah, he just came off of a high budget Shakespeare movie.
Yeah, he had that Shakespearean acting like fresh on his mind, and then he was in Event Horizon.
Yeah, and keep in mind the '90s were a huge time for Shakespeare adaptations, right? Like that was the type of movie you wanted to be in. There was a lot of like really critically acclaimed Shakespeare adaptations at the time. The Romeo plus Juliet, the Othello adaptation he was in, Anthony Hopkins was in. I'm blanking. Maybe even like 2 Shakespeare adaptations. So Lawrence Fishburne was doing the work in the '90s, and then all of a sudden is just in this movie.
Yeah,
He's in Event Horizon.
Yeah, it's like not only was he in a Shakespeare adaptation, he was in a time where it was competitive to be in a Shakespeare adaptation. So he's really putting his heart and soul into this acting. And then Event Horizon, he's really not phoning it in. He keeps it going. He's easily the best part about this movie. He carries it on his shoulders.
He does, for sure.
Yeah, there's a scene where The I told you the youngest crew member Justin gets possessed. Yeah, and he's catatonic, but he wakes up and he walks into an airlock with no suit, and it's like counting down to shoot him out into space. And he's like in a catatonic state, and he's like, "You would do what I'm doing if you saw the things I saw." And then suddenly, I guess he just forgets he went to hell, and he's like, "What's going on? Why am I in here?" And I don't understand why. But then he's like, "Please don't let me die." And she's like, "We can't open the door." And I the whole time was thinking, like, can't he open the door? There's a big green open button on his side of the door. He could have just opened the door. Whatever. Uh, Freaking Lawrence Fishburne is like in a space chute, like swimming through zero gravity as quickly as he can towards the airlock so he can karate kick Justin, like tackle him, push him back into the ship. And like the effects are so weird. All of Justin's veins like get huge and his eyeballs start bleeding blood, and like blood is pouring out of every like pore of his body. And Lawrence Fishburne tackles him and throws him back into the ship. And he somehow lives and is fine afterwards, even though like every vein in his body seemed to explode. And once again, we have a weird fixation on the eyes.
Yeah.
I don't
There
know.
was that weird, not 3D, but 3D looking shot of the blood shooting out of his eyeballs.
Yeah. There was a few times in this movie I thought, do you think this movie was in 3D?
97?
Yeah, it could have happened.
Yeah, that's true. When did Jaws 3 come out?
Oh, like 80s.
Yeah, so
3D's been a thing for a while.
maybe.
I think it could
Maybe.
have been. It well, like think Friday the 13th 3D is the third entry.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Oh god, that's let me tell you this. This movie did have some bad like pseudo 3D effects. None of them were as bad as any of the effects in Friday the 13th 3D.
Yeah.
So, we'll give it credit for that at least.
Yeah, that's true. But that scene was the one for me that was the most ridiculous. That was like, so stupid. It also like it's also one of these scenes did not need to happen. I feel like a lot of this movie is it doesn't need to happen. It's nothing to do with the plot. Like it's just kind of crazy, weird things, crazy, stressful things are happening. The plot, like if they just strictly followed the plot, this movie could have been 30 minutes long. And I'm glad they don't. I'm glad it's kind of loose and all over the place, because then most of the movie is just you watching these characters run around a haunted spaceship and, you know, weird, crazy, creepy things are happening. And that's most of the film.
Yeah.
And you're not really invested in the plot anyway. It's a dumb plot. It's Paul W.S. Anderson. So I think it works. I mean, it's hard. Some movies that so doesn't work. But in a movie where you go into it knowing Paul W.S. Anderson directed it, knowing the plot's going to be dumb, and knowing you don't care, it works.
Yeah. I agree. Like I said, I enjoyed this movie. I think that for the runtime and for what it is, a late 90s, fairly original sci-fi horror piece, I think it's fun. It's fun enough to spend the hour and a half on it. And with it streaming for free, if you have HBO Max, or even I'm sure you can dig it out of a bargain bin in any, department store, then I'd say it's worth the watch.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't know. Is it semi-original? It's original to a degree, but also I feel like Paul W.S. Anderson just went, "Hey, what if we do Hellraiser in space?" And then they did.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's true. And even the script, like I said, the writer admitted it's like a Warhammer 40K fanfic.
It's Hellraiser meets Warhammer. That's the whole movie.
Do you want to hear something really cursed?
Sure.
A lot. And I mean like a fair amount of Warhammer fans and players consider this to be the unofficial sequel of Warhammer 40K.
Okay, I don't see how this could possibly relate to anything.
I don't either, but we don't play Warhammer.
That's true. I wouldn't know. I guess I would not know.
But I found that out upon my research.
Well, good. Shout out to the Warhammer fans. If you're a Warhammer fan, you'll love this movie. If you love Hellraiser, but you thought there wasn't enough spaceships in it, then this is the movie for you as well. So,
If you like Paul W.S. Anderson, shout out to Paul, friend of the show.
yeah. Is that all you have to say about this
Yeah,
movie?
I like it.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Adrian.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, yeah, and thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.